Well, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my last documented session of 2025. You join me at a beautiful little spot about 150 meters from my back door. A lovely, lovely little spot that my neighbors have been so kind as to let me access to do some fishing at my leisure, they say. Let me tell you a little bit about how this year has been, because I'm sure you've been following along with my journeys, but if you haven't, let's kind of briefly overview how this year has gone, because it's been quite a year. Starting off, we had a once-in-a-generation ice storm. I'd say it was definitely the worst one I've seen in my lifetime, and that ice storm absolutely slammed my neighborhood and as well as the surrounding area in Peterborough. And needless to say, I was chainsawing my way out to get to CanCast, which was a very exciting event. And we were constantly on our toes for that one. We always thought, maybe the power's going to go out at any moment, the internet's going to go down again, whatever. But somehow we managed to keep it all together. And inconsiderate neighbors in this neighborhood. Critters. We thought, it might mean anything could happen at any moment there, and we might have to shut it down. But somehow we managed to keep the memorial center up and running, and we ended up having a really successful show. Made a lot of great connections, and ended up selling a lot of my mortar weights, a lot more than I had anticipated, to be fair. Made some great connections as well for the guide service, and it was an amazing event. Following that, I got to go down to the GTA with my good friends Kenny and James, and although I didn't catch any fish, it was really cool to actually see the stock of fish in that little lake, that little park lake. There was some really cool little ghosties and koi amongst the numerous little fish, and I think maybe next year we'll have to go back out and give it a try again if the weather permits, because this year was a little bit different than it was last year around the same time. So unseasonably warm versus more seasonal temperatures, you can do the math there. So coming off the coattails of that and that excitement, I decided that it would be great to start up my campaign in the Peterborough area in the coming weeks. And so I started baiting up an area. I had a spot in mind, and if you watch the Marsh Mission video, you'll know that it turned out really well. One session in there, in and out kind of business, and a few hours after work, and I managed 4 beautiful carp. And that was a great start to the year, and it got the ball rolling for me. And right after that, it was like, time for my next mission. And my next mission was to try to have a similar success to what Galen and I had last year with our underwater filming. And if you watched the hurdles, you'll know that I started in May, and I didn't accomplish that mission of even getting one fish to take underwater in a clear picture, that is, until the middle of September. So that was quite a haul. And I think it was sometime around July that I finally had to give it a little rest and go do some fishing to enjoy and keep the underwater camera at home, just so I could reset and recalibrate. But that was an amazing experience, honestly, to finally have that fish on the underwater camera. But I learned so much about fishing, and I see why Galen is so obsessed with it. And if you haven't checked out Galen's channel, ONT Carping, I really encourage you to do so. He 1000% has eliminated so much assumption, right? The number of times where I was sat there going, well, I haven't had any indications, so the fish must not be around. And then I review the footage and am gobsmacked by the number of fish that were within a foot of my rig that just weren't actually in that feeding mood. They weren't in that competitive feeding mood. It was really eye-opening, and it kind of makes me sit here and think, wow, the number of times fish have been that close and have never taken. And there's things that are outside of your control. Like once you put that rig out there, you're making a lot of assumptions. So it was cool to sort of unlearn things that I had so heavily cemented into my fishing, and then try to go about thinking outside the box, thinking outside of convention. And so that we'll talk about how I've done that here at this spot, and how that actually managed to lead to a really great capture shortly here. But so following that, I mean, I had a lot of great fish on those sessions, I should say, with those underwater sessions. Sometimes they weren't where the camera was, right? So I had like rods were down right in front of the camera, and I'd have another rod off to the left, and that rod would keep going. So I had a session actually about 20 yards away from here. I had 8 fish, with fish up to 33 pounds. It was quite a session, but not a single one of them came on the rod in front of the underwater camera. You know, them's the breaks. But yeah, I mean, I had a number of great sessions throughout spring, and then as I came into summertime, I decided to get the carp fin boot out, right? And that's you know, always a pleasure getting that little boat out on the water and finding those swims and, you know, baiting them up, and the challenge of trying to stay static in one spot in this tiny little boat that wants to get rocked everywhere. But I managed to secure a few fish out of the carp fin boot, you know, sort of just ahead of the spawn, maybe even just during the spawn. I may have actually sneaked one out there as well. But as I came into July, I had something rather important to attend to, my bachelor party, and hopefully you got to see that video. What an epic session that was. Loads of fun, you know, just surrounded by friends, having the best of times. And after the bachelor party, catching so many fish, I think we lost count at some point. It was definitely over 20 of them, may even been approaching 30. But I ended up, you know, deciding to go out in the carp fin boot again, and this actually turned out, it's funny how you notice things in hindsight, but I got out and I had a red letter session in a stretch where I had fished numerous times in the past, back especially when I was a student, and yeah, it turned out to be quite a session. I had I think 7 or 8 fish, and the biggest one out of the carp fin boot thus far, it was high 20s for sure. I didn't get a weight on it, but it was definitely 27, 28 pounds. Massive river common. Fought like an absolute demon. It was a great time. So with that comes, you know, that moment of hindsight. I realized that's going to be my last session out of the carp fin boot, with it being in my possession. I'm going to be returning the carp fin boot back to Conrad, and you know, it's given me some amazing opportunities to explore waters near and far, but I think what I have planned for next year is going to open up even more opportunities. So, you know, if you know, you know. If you don't, stay tuned. I should have some updates about that soon, but this will be my last year with the carp fin boot before it goes back to its original owner, Conrad. So yeah, and then in August, well, what happened in August? Let's see. Oh yeah, I got married. Crazy. You know, I think about how 4 years ago around this time, I was making a video, and I was talking about how I'd found someone incredible. And, you know, you sit back in hindsight and you think about it, you go like, you had no idea, did you, buddy? You know, you had no idea what was in store for you. But the relationship I built with Amanda, and, you know, the trials, the tribulations we've gone through, the ups and downs, the adventures we've gone on, and you know, the moments we've shared, I am the luckiest man in the world. I really am. And, you know, I never really thought of myself as a man getting married, you know, especially after some of my experiences in previous relationships, right? Like, I didn't see myself as someone who was ever going to be married, because I felt like maybe I wasn't worthy of that, or that I wouldn't find someone who would understand me, or be able to put up with me that long. But I found Amanda, and, you know, these 4 years, you know, we don't go to bed angry. We say I love you, and, you know, she brings out a childish giddiness in me, you know, chasing her around the house, you know, making her morning coffee, and like, but it's weird how to describe. She brings out a childish giddiness in me, but she makes me want to be a better man, you know, and a better father. And I think that's just such an interesting, you know, contrast. You know, she makes me want to be playful and silly and be myself, but also be a better man, a better father. What a strange thing. I don't even know how to really put into words how much I love that woman. It's a fascinating thing, love, because you can sit here and try to quantify it and try to provide some sort of qualitative adjectives, but really it's this idea that I could see myself with no one else loving life the way that I do. You know, she is my do or die, my, you know, till death do us part. She is the love of my life, and I'm just so grateful. And you know, I know at some point you're going to see this, sweetheart, so I love you, and I will fix that sink really soon, I promise. It was like literally the day after the wedding, I got an email, and that email was for a teaching position, and it was a full-time, long-term occasional. So it meant that I had a full-time position. It was a 1.0 equivalent, and it was a long-term, and it looks like it's going to be one of those really long-term. Like I might be there for the entire year, and so I consider myself very blessed. You know, I got a promising career as an educator, and I'm learning more and more about all the fun and some of the more administrative stuff, like writing up individualized education plans, and, you know, progress reports and report cards, and finding out new things that were, you know, in some of the back offices of my learning modules and stuff. But you know, it's a learning experience, but I consider myself very, very fortunate to have a full-time, you know, to start my year, and what very well likely will be the entire year. Amazing experience, and I've got a great group of kids. I really do. You know, sometimes they drive me crazy, but you know what? There's something redeemable in each one of them. You know, they're good kids. So yeah, that kind of brings us up to date, and kind of brings us to this location now, which you know, I'm really grateful to be here today. I'm really, really fortunate. But it comes on the coattails of something actually kind of tragic, and it's a little bit of a public service announcement. You know, I'd been fishing a spot over the past few years, and a spot that when I was a child I used to fish a lot when I would go to visit my grandparents up in the Buckhorn region, and yeah, and I used to take my kids there to go fishing too. And I went back there a couple of weeks ago now, and there was a sign up, no fishing. And I know why, and I think that's what bothers me the most, is it's because of the way that people have treated that space, and the trash that has been there, and you know, people leaving their fishing line and whatnot. And so you knew it was only a matter of time, and it's disappointing, it's frustrating, and you know, to know that I can't take my kids back there to fish, and that I won't be able to necessarily go out there and enjoy it anymore. You know, there's nothing you can do about it. I understand the motives of, you know, the municipality and whatnot. I know what their mission is, to try to preserve that space and you know, keep it sustainable and keep it, you know, accessible for everyone. So I mean, if you're not going to clean up after yourself, this is the consequence. You know, it doesn't just affect you, it affects others. So public service announcement, pick up your trash. But after explaining that story to my neighborhood, because we were having a community garage sale, I spoke with my one set of neighbors, and they said, you know, that's really frustrating, but why don't you come out and fish our property? You know, this is always accessible to you. You can come out anytime you want. And I was just like, wow, really? You mean it? And, you know, they said, absolutely, come on out. No one else uses it, and you know, if you can catch some big fish, then all the power to you. And so I put in some bait. I had some bait left over from that session, so I was like, all right, I'll throw a little bit of bait in. And you know, I plumbed around, and I knew it was super weedy in here. It gets super weedy in this spot. Lots of weeds blow into this area too, because it's always on the windward bank. And so I knew, like, it gets choked out in July, and it's almost unfishable at that point unless you have a boat generally. But I figured, well, you know, if I baited up a lot in spring, there's a chance that I could keep the weeds down. But it actually turned out that the fish were here, because the first day I came back after baiting, there was fish in the swim. You know, I put some rods out and I couldn't get them to bite, but they were here. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, I can't believe there's carp here. But, you know, this is one of those things where you begin to remove assumption. And because I was fishing in close, I could keep an eye on them. And with my head torch on, I was actually able to see that these fish, even though they were kind of patrolling over the weeds, a pop-up right at their face, they had no interest in it. But they would dive down into those weed plumes and take the corn that I'd thrown down and the particle that I'd thrown down. And they were also picking it off of the tall weed clumps, these massive like boulders of weed, even though there's nothing there. There's no substance to it. It's just a clump of this weird pondweed. But they were taking the corn, so I thought to myself, I gotta think outside of convention here. You know, so I baited a ton in front and had them clear out a big sort of dinner plate, you know, and it turned into more like a coffee table. They got right down to the gravel there, and I was like, perfect, I can drop a rig on that, and I know that's going to be presenting well. And the other rod, I thought, well, let's do a chod, but think outside the box. They're taking the corn. What if we popped up an actual grain of corn right from the bucket? And so that's what I did. I put a grain of corn on and a bit of yellow foam and flopped it out, watched how it fell, and I was just like, oh, chef's kiss. And yeah, about a week ago now, I came out here and put the rods out. Big storm was pushing in, you know, last warm day of the year. And just as soon as that storm front was hitting, there was also a solar lunar event, right? It was the moonrise and the sunset were kind of coming together, and I was like, oh, that's quite a window. And sure enough, as soon as that storm front hit, first little drops of rain came down, run. Hook pulled that one, because it's the story of my life, right? And then got that rod right back on the dance floor again. Once again, this was on the clear spot, and that rod went off 20 minutes after, and broke that one off on the lift. As soon as I lifted the rod up, snap. So clearly I was like, all right, there's a lot of zebras in here. And that kind of burned my butt a little bit, as you can imagine. So got another rig tied up, PVA bag on it, right back down to the spot, plop. And the storm started pushing in really hard. Rain was coming in sideways. You know, the flag in front of me here was blowing aggressively. And so I took refuge underneath my neighbor's deck here. They've got a nice sheltered deck. And I waited for it to pass, the worst of it to pass, and sure enough, the worst of it began to pass, and you know, wind started to slow down a bit, and it was just like clockwork. As soon as that happened, rod went off again, right off the dance floor, and managed to get that one in. Finally managed to get that one. A beautiful 21-pounder, long, lean fighting machine, and yeah, like I knew, I was like, okay, I've probably burned that spot now. Surely 3 fish off that, 3 runs on that spot. You know that they're going to be weary of it now. But that left-hand rod, you know, popped up corn off the weed mat. I knew there was a chance, because usually after 7:30, 8 o'clock, they kind of came up off the bottom and were really slowly moving. So I thought, okay, if I can get a patrolling fish to come across that, that's going to do a run. And sure enough, it did. About half an hour after I released that 21, that rod went into absolute meltdown, peeled off, went straight right over by, like, you know, boat lifts and docks, and just, come on, right, get back here. And I managed to secure that fish and get it in the net after a heck of a fight. It was in those weed plumes left and right, up and down, but a beautiful 28-pounder. And if that's how I end my season, that's how I end my season. But I wanted to do this video today just to sort of review the whole 2025 season. I've got the rods in there. There's always a chance. They have come in at some point and cleared out the bait that was on that dance floor. So fingers crossed, maybe we can get lucky and get one more. But if not, I hope this video has found you well. And until next time, tight lines.
With that bitter northeasterly wind blowing in, I accepted the blank with grace. With time running out and reports due soon, I managed to find one more evening in my schedule, and it just so happened to fall on a much more pleasant evening. I set up the rods quickly and welcomed whatever that last evening would have in store. I remember mentioning to a few friends in a group chat, as well as the homeowners, that there was quite a substantial fish swimming around this dock. It's always nice to have that confirmation that there are big fish in that swim, and I knew that spring was going to be fruitful. But as the sun set on my very last session of 2025, I had a visitor.
That's a big fish. That's a good fish. Well, when I showed up tonight, there was one fish in the swim. I got to see it, and I spooked it the minute that the rig went in, but it came back around. And this is how I'm gonna end my 2025 season. With this beautiful 33.5 pound common. What an absolute tank. Well made up. Well made up. Oh, thanks. Thanks, fish.